rejected Omega was sold with her baby, until the Alpha King said, "I'll be dad and husband both." Torches flickered along cobblestone streets, casting shadows that twisted like living things. In the heart of the city, a marketplace rose from the darkness, a place where whispers and cruel laughter filled the air. Here, the rejected, the cursed, and the unwanted were brought for all to see, for all to trade. Ilara moved through the crowd, cradling her infant son, Kale, close to her chest. His tiny body trembled not from cold but from the fear that clung to her like a second skin. She could feel every eye upon them, some curious, some cruel, some hungry for opportunity. Her once noble gown had been torn and patched so many times that the fine silk beneath it was invisible, swallowed by rags and dust. The Omega had been cast out by her own family, branded with the words that would haunt her forever: cursed, dangerous, unwanted. It was not the first time she had felt the sting of rejection, nor would it be the last. Her child, her only reason to keep moving forward, was the only light that pierced the darkness around her. A bell rang, heavy and sharp, and the auction began. Ilara was led to a raised platform, the crowd parting to let her through. She tried to steady her shaking hands as Kale nuzzled her neck, sensing her unease. Around them, the air felt electric, charged with whispers of ancient prophecies, words spoken too softly for her to understand, but heavy with intent. "Do not let them see fear," she whispered to herself, brushing a strand of hair from Kale's face. "Be strong, be invisible." The auctioneer, a tall man with a voice like gravel, gestured to the gathered nobles. "Tonight, we present a rare offering. An Omega of noble blood sold along with her child, a mother cursed, yet her son may hold the key to powers yet unseen." The words stung. Ilara's stomach twisted, but she did not cry. She could not. Her eyes met Kale's, wide and trusting, and she knew she had to survive for him. Bidding began, voices rough and demanding. Men and women of power spoke in numbers and titles, trading not with words of kindness but with greed and hunger. Ilara's heart pounded with each offer, each coin tossed as if her life and her child's were nothing more than a commodity. Then a murmur ran through the crowd. The Alpha King of the northern lands, Thuron, had arrived. His presence was like the cold wind from the mountains themselves, sharp and impossible to ignore. Tall, broad-shouldered, with eyes that seemed to see beyond the surface of all things, he stepped forward. Whispers followed him, reverent and fearful. They spoke of his rule over snow-laden lands, his unmatched skill in battle and his unyielding judgment. Thuron's gaze fell on Ilara and Kale. For a long moment he said nothing. Yet in that silence something unspoken passed between them, a recognition older than memory, a pull that neither fully understood. Ilara's breath caught. She had heard of kings who could command armies, but she had never imagined one whose presence alone could silence the world around him. "Who dares claim this Omega and child?" Thuron's voice was calm but carried weight, a storm held in quiet form. The auctioneer flinched, but he answered, "She is for sale, your majesty. Anyone may—" "Stop," Thuron interrupted, stepping closer, his gaze fixed on Ilara. "No coin will buy what fate has already decided." The words confused her. Fate, what could he mean? Her heart raced, a mixture of hope and fear. She had been sold once, cast aside, and yet now a man of unimaginable power was speaking as if her life and her child's were already promised. Before the auctioneer could recover, Thuron moved forward and laid a hand on the platform. The crowd fell silent, 1,000 eyes turning toward him. "I claim the mother and child, not for trade, not for gain, for the safety of the child, for the honor of blood, and for the future that will come." Gasps filled the hall. The minor lord who had hoped to buy her stepped forward, anger flashing in his eyes. "You cannot. They belong to me." Thuron's gaze was icy. "Do not mistake the law of greed for the law of fate. Step aside or face consequences you are not ready to endure." The lord's smile faltered, but he did not back down. Then Kale stirred in Alara's arms. His small hand brushed against Thuron's, and a faint glow spread from the infant's palm, lighting the space between them like a spark of moonlight. The crowd gasped, stepping back. Even the auctioneer looked pale. Alara's heart skipped. Kale had never done that before, not openly, not in front of anyone. She did not understand why, but in that instant she knew the child had sensed something in Thuron, something familiar, something powerful. Thuron knelt slightly, careful not to scare the baby. "It seems fate recognizes its own," he murmured, voice soft but carrying the weight of authority. "Come with me. I will ensure your safety. No harm will reach you while I stand between you and the world." Alara wanted to speak, to refuse, to protect Kale from anyone, even this imposing stranger, but she felt a strange calm descend over her. She had spent so long fearing the world, fearing herself, fearing what her curse could do. And yet something in Thuron's presence promised protection, not control, guidance, not dominance. With trembling hands, she allowed him to lift Kale from her arms, though she kept her hands close, fingers brushing against her child's soft skin. Thuron's hands were strong but gentle, steady as the mountains themselves. As he handed Kale back to her, he said quietly, "You are not alone anymore, not unless you choose to be." The minor lord, enraged and humiliated, muttered darkly, "You think you can claim what is not yours. The curse will not be denied. The child will not serve your purpose without spilling blood." Thuron's eyes narrowed, the storm in him awakening. "Let him try," he said, voice low and dangerous. "Let anyone try who dares threaten those I claim." The crowd parted as Thuron turned and led Alara and Kale out of the auction hall. Torches flared in the night, shadows dancing across stone walls, but inside the small Omega, a flicker of hope stirred. Perhaps there was someone who would see her as more than cursed, more than unwanted. Perhaps there was someone who could protect her child without fear of greed or cruelty. Outside, the streets were quieter, but the city did not sleep. Dark figures lingered in alleys, whispers of past debts and old grudges trailing behind her. Alara tightened her grip on Kale, her small hand pressing against her chest. She had survived the auction, but the world beyond was no gentler. Thuron's carriage awaited, black and imposing, drawn by horses that snorted in the cold night air. As they rode, he spoke little, yet his presence alone filled the space with assurance. Alara studied him from the corner of her eye. He was not merely a king. He was a force of nature, commanding respect, demanding attention, and yet offering something she had never thought she could have: protection without chains, authority without cruelty. Kale dozed against her shoulder, his tiny chest rising and falling in a rhythm that calmed her nerves. The glow in his hand had faded, but the memory of it lingered, a spark of power and mystery that would not be ignored. Thuron finally broke the silence. "The night is not safe, but the mountains are. There you and the child will be protected. There we can plan for what comes next." Alara nodded silently, unsure if she believed him, unsure if she even trusted the world. Yet for the first time in many moons, she allowed herself a small measure of hope. Perhaps her life, and Kale's life, did not have to be defined by rejection. Perhaps the darkness that had followed them could be met with strength, with courage, with guidance. As the carriage climbed into the hills surrounding Thuron's northern kingdom, the torches of Exarion shrinking behind them, Alara felt the weight of the night lift slightly. Yet she could not forget the auctioneer's words, the minor lord's threat, or the strange, glowing power in Kale's hand. Danger had not disappeared. It had only followed them into the shadows, waiting. And somewhere deep within the child and deep within her own heart, something ancient and powerful stirred, whispering of a destiny that could not be ignored. Cliffhanger. As the carriage passed through a narrow mountain pass, the night air shivered with a strange, icy wind. Kale's small hand glowed once more, brighter than before, illuminating the dark path ahead. Alara's eyes widened, and she felt a chill not from the cold but from realization. Their journey had only begun, and the forces that sought them were already closing in. The carriage rolled through the mountain pass as the first light of dawn broke over the northern peaks. The snow-capped ridges glimmered like silver under the sun, and the icy wind carried whispers that seemed almost alive. Alara held Kale tightly, shivering not from cold, but from the mixture of fear and uncertainty that had settled deep within her chest. She had survived the auction, but the world beyond Exarion was unknown, and unknowns were dangerous. Thuron guided them through the winding roads in silence, his gaze fixed ahead, sharp as the edge of a blade. Alara stole glances at him from time to time. He was massive, towering over the carriage, with broad shoulders and a presence that seemed to command even the mountains themselves. Yet there was something softer in the way he watched Kale, something protective that unsettled her. She had never known a man capable of both strength and tenderness. When they finally arrived at the castle, it loomed over the valley like a fortress carved from stone and shadow. Its towers pierced the sky, and the walls glinted with frost. Guards dressed in dark fur and steel flanked the gates, their eyes alert, their hands never far from their weapons. Alara felt her pulse quicken. The castle was magnificent, but it radiated power and danger in equal measure. Thuron dismounted first, holding out his hand to help Alara down. "Welcome," he said, his voice low but firm. "This place is safe. Within these walls no one can harm you or the child." Alara hesitated before stepping down, her small hand brushing against Kale's cheek. I don't know if I can trust anyone," she admitted softly. Her voice was almost swallowed by the wind. "Not after everything that has happened." Thuron's gaze softened slightly. "Trust is not given, it is earned," he said, "but you have earned protection tonight. I will not fail you." The castle's interior was cold but grand. High ceilings arched like the sky itself, and tapestries depicting ancient battles and legends hung along the walls. Torches flickered, casting dancing shadows that seemed to tell stories of their own. Alara could feel the weight of centuries in the stones beneath her feet. She kept Kale close, feeling the warmth of his small body against her own. A maid appeared, bowing deeply. "Your rooms are prepared, Your Majesty," she said to Thuron, then looked at Alara with curiosity. "And the Omega, she will have her own chamber, and the child's safety is ensured." Alara followed the maid to a smaller room near the inner courtyard. It was modest but warm, with a soft bed for her and a crib for Kale. The walls were lined with simple carvings of forests and rivers, and a window looked out over the snowy landscape. For the first time since her exile, Alara allowed herself to breathe. Kale, sensing the calm, relaxed slightly, his tiny hands curling around her finger. Alara whispered, "We are safe, at least for now." But even as she spoke, she could not shake the unease that lingered. Something was watching them beyond the walls. Shadows moved in the forests below, and the wind carried whispers she could not understand. Thuron entered the room then, his presence filling the small space. "The child is powerful," he said quietly, eyes fixed on Kale. "Not just magic, but something older, something tied to blood and fate. We must be careful." Alara's heart skipped. "What do you mean?" she asked, her voice trembling. "He's just a baby." Thuron knelt slightly, bringing himself to their level. "Power does not follow size," he said. "The child may be the key to something far larger than either of us, and enemies will come for him." Alara's hands tightened around Kale. Fear and protectiveness surged through her. She had survived auctions, cruelty, and rejection, but the thought of losing Kale, of being unable to protect him, was unbearable. Over the following days, Thuron introduced her to the ways of the castle. She learned to move through the halls without fear, to read the gestures and moods of the guards, and to understand that even in safety, danger often lingered unseen. Alara began to notice the small ways Thuron watched over her and Kale, subtle gestures of care that she had never experienced before. He would quietly adjust the blankets around Kale, or leave food for her when she returned from the courtyard. Despite her caution, Alara could not ignore the pull she felt toward him. He was unlike anyone she had ever met, strong, commanding, yet patient. And yet, she reminded herself constantly, he was a king, and she was an Omega who had been sold like property. Their worlds were not meant to touch. One evening, as the sun dipped behind the mountains and the sky turned a deep violet, Thuron approached her while she was rocking Kale in the nursery. The room was quiet, lit only by a single lantern. Kale's eyes were heavy with sleep, and Alara felt the exhaustion she had been ignoring for days. "I have watched you," Thuron said, his voice low but steady. "You care for him with more strength than most parents I have known. I admire that." Alara looked up, startled. She had not expected praise from him, nor did she know what to say. "I only do what I must," she whispered. Thuron stepped closer, his eyes meeting hers. "You are more than what others have said about you, stronger, braver, and the child, he knows it too. That is why he reacts to me as he does." Alara's throat tightened. He has always been special," she said softly, "but I fear what others will do if they discover his abilities. I fear for his life." Thuron nodded, placing a hand lightly on hers. "Then we face them together," he said. "Not as king and subject, not as Alpha and Omega, but as two who care for the same child. Together, we are stronger than any enemy." Her heart beat faster, torn between hope and caution. Could she trust him? Could she allow herself to feel anything beyond fear? That night, as she lay in her bed, Alara held Kale close and thought of the auction, the minor lord's threats, and the strange glow that had come from her son. She could not sleep, her mind racing with questions and fears. Somewhere outside, the wind howled through the towers, carrying with it whispers of dark intentions. Suddenly, a sound from the courtyard caught her attention. Footsteps, soft but deliberate, moving closer to her window. She froze, holding her breath. Kale stirred in her arms, sensing her fear. Thuron's voice broke the silence from the doorway. "Do not fear, I am here." He stepped inside, closing the door behind him. His presence calmed her, though not entirely. The shadows beyond the window remained, hinting at dangers she could not yet face. "We are not alone," he said quietly, his gaze fixed on the night outside. "The enemies who followed you will not rest. They will come for the child, for you, for the blood you carry." Alara's hands tightened around Kale. "Then we fight," she said, her voice trembling but firm. "We fight together." Thuron nodded, a faint smile touching his lips, though his eyes remained serious. "Yes, together." The following days tested them both. Alara learned to harness small aspects of Kale's emerging magic, guided by Thuron's knowledge of the kingdom and its ancient laws. They practiced quietly, in hidden rooms and behind locked doors, each lesson drawing them closer. The bond between them grew, not just of necessity, but of respect and understanding. Alara began to see Thuron as more than a king, more than a protector. He was someone who could understand fear, someone who could temper power with compassion. And Thuron, in turn, began to see Alara not as a cursed Omega or a sold commodity, but as a mother, a woman of courage, and someone capable of facing shadows he had never known. Yet, danger always lingered. One night, as the northern wind shrieked against the castle walls, a shadow moved across the courtyard. Alara sensed it immediately, an intruder. Kale stirred, his tiny body glowing faintly with magic that pulsed like a heartbeat. Thuron moved swiftly, taking her hand. "Stay behind me," he whispered. "Whatever comes, we face it together." The shadow stepped into the torchlight, a figure cloaked in black, face hidden, intentions unclear. Alara's heart raced. She had survived the auction, the minor lord, and the dark whispers of Exarian, but this felt different. This was closer. This was personal. Kale's small glow intensified, illuminating the intruder. The figure stumbled back, as if the child's power had burned through the shadows themselves. Alara realized then that the journey ahead would be more dangerous than she had imagined, and that trust, even in Thuron, was only the beginning of what she needed to survive. Cliffhanger, the intruder fell to their knees, revealing a sigil burned into their cloak, a symbol tied to the curse that haunted Alara's bloodline. Their voice, low and trembling, whispered, "The child he is not yours to protect." The prophecy begins now. The northern winds howled like wild spirits outside the castle walls, rattling the stone towers and tossing snow across the frozen courtyard. Inside, the castle was tense with anticipation. Alara held Kale tightly in her arms, feeling the subtle warmth of his glowing hand against her chest. He had never shone like this before, not even during the auction. Something deep within him had awakened. Thuron stood beside her, his posture unyielding, eyes scanning every shadow. The intruder's sigil still haunted him, an ancient mark tied to a curse older than the kingdoms themselves. "They know the child's power," he said, voice low but steady, "and they will come to claim it." Alara's lips pressed together. "Then we will not let them. I cannot lose him, not again." Thuron's hand found hers, strong and reassuring. "You will not while I stand." The days that followed were a blur of preparation. Guards trained relentlessly, fortifications were strengthened, and Thuron guided Alara in using her connection to Kale's power. Though he did not reveal all his knowledge of the child's magic, he taught her enough to create protective wards and barriers, combining her instincts as a mother with his strategic mind as a king. Kale, sensing the tension, began to respond more to his mother's voice. A mere whisper from Alara could ignite a small shield of shimmering light around them. Yet, the more the child's power grew, the more dangerous it became. Alara could feel the weight of destiny pressing upon her. She had once been rejected, sold, and abandoned, but now she was the center of a storm that could reshape kingdoms. One night, under the pale light of a full moon, Thuron approached her as she rocked Kale to sleep. The nursery was quiet, the shadows long and heavy. "Alara," he said softly, "you have faced more than most, yet you have done so with courage. I see your strength not just for the child but for yourself." Alara looked up at him, eyes wide. "I never thought anyone could see me, not truly. I was sold. I was cast out. I thought that was the end of my story." Thuron knelt before her, taking her hands gently in his. "The end is only the beginning, Alara. You and this child, you are part of something greater, something worth fighting for." Alara felt a warmth spread through her chest, a mixture of fear, hope, and something she dared not name. She wanted to believe him, to trust in the protection he offered, but the shadows beyond the walls reminded her that danger was never far. The following morning the intruder returned, this time with allies hidden in the forest surrounding the castle. The sound of hoofbeats, the clatter of weapons, and the hiss of unseen creatures filled the air. The enemy had come to take Kale, to harness his power for purposes Alara could barely comprehend. Thuron moved quickly, placing himself between Alara, Kale, and the approaching threat. "Stay close to him," he instructed. "Trust the magic, trust me." Alara felt a spark of fear but nodded. She whispered to Kale, "We are together always, you and I and him too." Her voice carried warmth, love, and command, and the child responded immediately. A soft, radiant glow began to expand from Kale's small hands, forming a barrier that shimmered in the morning light. The enemies halted, startled by the sudden burst of power. Thuron raised his sword, his movements fluid, precise, and deadly. Every strike he delivered was controlled, protecting the child and Alara, each action a testament to his skill and determination. Alara, inspired by his courage, allowed herself to focus on Kale's magic. The light from his hands intensified, forming protective walls around them. The intruders stumbled, their weapons unable to penetrate the radiant shield. The snow around the courtyard seemed to swirl, carried by the force of Kale's awakening power. And then, one of the intruders broke through the line of light, his movements fast and desperate. Alara acted instinctively, stepping forward and using Kale's magic in unison with her own. A burst of energy shot from the child, striking the intruder and sending him sprawling into the snow. Thuron's eyes softened for a moment as he saw Alara stand strong beside him. "You are remarkable," he said quietly, pride and awe mingling in his voice. Alara met his gaze, and for the first time she allowed herself to feel something beyond fear. She saw in him not only the strength of a king, but the kindness of a man who could love without possession. Her heart, long guarded, began to thaw. The battle was fierce but brief. With Kale's power and Thuron's skill, the intruders were driven back, fleeing into the forest, their plans foiled. The castle was safe, though scarred, and the northern winds carried the echoes of the confrontation far into the valleys below. That night, as the castle quieted, Alara sat with Kale in her arms, exhausted but triumphant. Thuron entered the room, setting down a small lantern. He knelt beside her, his eyes reflecting both relief and something deeper, admiration, respect, and a quiet longing. "You have done more than survive," he said. "You have protected him. You have faced the shadows and emerged stronger." Alara looked at him, tears threatening to fall. "I never thought I could be this strong, not without fear, not without you." Thuron's hand found hers again. "You are stronger than you know, and you are not alone anymore. I will stand with you always. Not just as a king, not just as an alpha, but as someone who cares for you both." Alara's breath caught. The words carried a weight she had not expected, a promise of protection, of partnership, of love. She felt the chains of her past loosen, the rejection that had haunted her for so long begin to fade. Thuron rose, offering his hand. "Come with me," he said. "We have much to face, but together we can overcome anything." Alara nodded, holding Kale close. Together they left the nursery, walking through the corridors of the castle. The walls that had once seemed imposing now felt like a shield, protecting them from a world that had sought to harm them. As they reached the highest tower, they looked out over the mountains and forests. The snow glistened under the moonlight, and the air was filled with the quiet hum of magic, Kale's magic, ancient and bright, entwined with the love and courage of those who protected him. Thuron placed a hand on Alara's shoulder. "This is only the beginning," he said softly. "The prophecy is not yet complete, but with you and the child by my side, I will face whatever comes." Alara's heart swelled. For the first time, she believed that love and strength could coexist, that the past did not have to define the future. She held Kale close, feeling the warmth of his small body and the power that lay within him. "I trust you," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "I trust you with him, with me." Thuron's eyes softened, and he lowered his forehead to hers in a quiet gesture of intimacy and respect. "And I will never betray that trust. Not now, not ever." The castle walls seemed to pulse with the energy of their bond, the magic of Kale, and the determination of those who would protect what was precious. Shadows still lingered in the forests below, but inside, the warmth of family and the strength of love blazed brighter than any threat. As they stood together, the child stirred in Alara's arms, his tiny hand glowing once more, brighter than ever before. The light spread around them, bathing the tower in a radiant glow that seemed to touch even the distant forests. Alara realized then that their journey had not ended, it had transformed. From rejection and fear had grown courage, love, and unity. She no longer felt like the Omega who had been sold. She was a mother, a protector, and a woman who had found strength in partnership and trust. Thuron's hand remained steady on hers, and she felt the unspoken promise in his touch. He would be both father and husband, protector and partner. Together, they would face the shadows of the world, the whispers of prophecy, and the dangers that sought the child's power. Cliffhanger final hook. Kale's glow pulsed again, forming shapes that neither Alara nor Thuron fully understood. The light was warm, protective, but it carried a whisper of future trials, of destiny yet to be revealed. Alara looked at Thuron, her eyes shining with both fear and hope. "Whatever comes," she said softly, "we face it together." Thuron nodded, his voice steady and certain. "Always together." And as the first light of dawn broke across the mountains, the three of them, Mother, Child, and Alpha King, stood united, ready to face a world that had once rejected them, and now could not break the bond they had forged in shadow, fire, and love.